Joining us now from the border. Lots to talk about. America's Sheriff David Clarke, has a great op-ed in Town Hall. Sheriff, great to have you on today.
John, it's my pleasure. I'm like a kid waking up on Christmas morning.
Well, you're at the border. I'm going to get to that in a second, but let's do two things first. Let's get the fact that the Astros beat your Cubs 2-3 off the table, and they could only win last night because half our team is hurt. So let's get that off the table. You have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, Cubs are sliding a little bit. I've had a little rough stretch here, but as I always say, and you know me, it's a long season.
162 games, right? But we did beat you 2-3. Okay, now, before we get to the border and the fact that you guys are actually building a wall, which is amazing, your reaction to the Mueller press conference yesterday, sir?
Surprised, but at the same time not surprised that this thing is still going on long after Mueller released his report and its conclusions. And let me say this, I know a little bit about criminal investigations. As a matter of fact, I know a lot about criminal investigations. There is no inconclusive. Either a crime was committed or it wasn't. This halfway in, one toe in the water, well, is inconclusive, and it's up to Congress. It's not up to Congress to do anything with this right now. This is just more of the theater and the charade that's going to be going on for the next 2 years, unfortunately, less than 2 years, going into the 2020 election. That's why the Democrats are still dragging this dead horse around. But the American people are on to this. Mueller had to justify his, as you indicated in your preface here, his 2-year, $35 million investigation that led to nothing. He knew it was going to lead to nothing. And so now, as you said, he's trying to wash his hands of it, throw it into the lap of Congress. But if he's throwing it into Congress, he knows this has to start in the House, and he's throwing it to the Democrats. He just offered up some red meat.
Well, a lot of people were saying yesterday that he did this press conference in order to encourage Democrats to go forward with impeachment, and other people saying that, everything is inconclusive, like he didn't conclude anything. And I have the opposite view. I think that it was totally conclusive. Innocent was the conclusion. Like, there was no crime that he could find for the president on any front, on anything that he investigated. But I think he was disappointed in that. I actually think that Robert Mueller wanted desperately to find evidence to say this president was guilty of something. Couldn't find it. And as a result of not finding it, flips the whole thing over and says, but I can't exonerate him. What the hell does that mean?
Well,
Sheriff?
I differ a little bit here in that he knew there was no crime that went on here. There was no Russian collusion. He knew that from the beginning. What he hoped, and this is where I think you and I agree, what he hoped was that they could concoct something. They could just take a bunch of stuff, throw it up against the wall, and then say that a crime was committed, but he knew. He's not stupid, all right? Mueller, I'm talking about. He knew that he'd never get this through a court of law, so they'd looked for 2 years to try to concoct some scheme that the president colluded. And by the way, collusion with the Russians in the election, even if it did happen, and we know it didn't, it's not a crime. So that's why I said he knew from the beginning there was no crime, but what he was tasked with was to find out if the Russians interfered in the 2016 election. He wasn't tasked with originally trying to find if Trump did anything. He was tasked to find if the Russians colluded to change the election, the outcome of the election in 2016. And that's what was conclusive in his report, but he didn't have the balls to say it, pardon my language, for your listeners, but he didn't have the balls to say that even the thing that he was originally looking at did not, in fact, happen.
Well, it's it didn't happen because there was nothing there. I just got to ask you this one other question, and we'll get off it. What was the purpose of that press conference? I mean, he released no new information, said nothing other than attempt to throw the ball to the Democrats and almost encourage them to do something that might lead to something else or further embarrass the president. But what was even the purpose of that? You did your job. You got your money. You're closing the office. Get a box, put your stuff in, and leave like everybody else. What was the purpose of that presser?
The purpose was that was Mueller's curtain call from this theater, this charade that's gone on for over 2 years at great expense to the faith and trust that people have in the federal government. You notice that he didn't say anything about, or very little, if anything, about the illegal activities of the FBI, an office that he led for over 10 years. He said nothing about them and their behavior, and that's part of what this investigation should have been able to uncover. But I think it speaks to the competence or lack of competence of Mueller when he looked right over that. That was the real crime that was committed, and he stayed focused on trying to hook the president up. But also what that did yesterday was it created more confusion, and that's what the Democrats need. They just need the confusion to continue here so that they can play this game going into 2016. This isn't going to stop by the Democrat House. It's not going to stop before 2020. I believe that when President Trump is reelected in 2020, this thing will continue even after that.
John Fredericks Radio Network, good to have you with us today, live at your nation's capital in the Swamp. We're with America's Sheriff David Clarke. At the border today, wall is actually going up with your wall program, a mile of it over the weekend. Can you elaborate on the success you're having?
It's unbelievable, and that's why I came down here to see for myself once again, and I could put aside all of the the screening, the propaganda, the demagoguing that the attackers and the pro-illegal immigration people are doing. I'm down here on the border of Juarez, Mexico. That is one of the most violent cities along the border in all of Mexico. It's that area, many of your listeners may recall, where they found 10 bodies beheaded.
Right.
That was in Juarez, Mexico, owned by the drug cartel. But anyway, there's a 2-mile stretch. It's an opening. There's a federal border fence along this section here in El Paso. It's also on the border of New Mexico, by the way. But there's a 2-mile gap. There's a 2-mile opening. It is one of the most active sites for drug crossings into the United States, illegal drugs, and human trafficking and general border crossings. The Border Patrol estimates, these are Border Patrol figures, $200,000 to $300,000 worth of illegal drugs a week come through this area over here. Over 300 people a day were crossing from Mexico into the United States in this section. So that's why we chose this. It's on private land, but it's a 2-mile opening. Well, guess what, John? In 3 short weeks, we were able to construct, and this is high-quality stuff. It's better than the fencing, the bollard-style fencing. It's better than the fencing that the government uses in terms of specs. The government uses 3/16-inch tubular steel for the bollards. We're using 1/4-inch. This thing is 18 feet high. It is 7 feet underground. It's going to have sensors. We're going to have cameras along this route. It's going to aid the Border Patrol to watch this entire area over here. Well, guess what? This 2-mile stretch, in another 2 or 3 weeks and we're done, there will be no more crossings in this section. It's a strategic point for the drug cartel here in Mexico. Now, here's another thing. The Army Corps of Engineers, because we didn't just come out here and start digging. We did our due diligence. The Army Corps of Engineers had to give a sign-off on it, and they did. The Army Corps of Engineers told us you will never build that type of fencing on this 2-mile stretch. That's why the government didn't do it, because it's too steep. Well, guess what? We're 1.5 miles in. In another 3 weeks, we'll have the other half-mile done. The Army Corps of Engineers told us it couldn't be done. Well, we did it. They underestimated us. This is high-quality stuff. It's going to assist the Border Patrol, as I said. And, in the end, the naysayers and all the haters and so on and so forth. Here's the last thing I'll say, and this is an important point. We have a source at former GSA, Federal Government Auditing Department, came down, took a look, and said if the federal government would have built this wall in this section, this 2-mile section, which they didn't. They left it because they said it couldn't be done, but this guy said if the government did this, it would have taken them 2.5 years, and it would have cost $40 million for the government to build this 2-mile stretching of bollard fencing. Well, it's taken us about 6 weeks, and it's only cost around $6 million. So you can see if we could just get the government out of the way, because the government is not going to do anything. Congress is not going to do anything about these border openings. And anything about illegal immigration, but with the spirit of the American people and the help of the American people. And again, we still need money. There's other places on private land along the border that we can do this. We're showing now that it can be done. WeBuildTheWall.org. We need the help of the American people. Please go there and make a donation.
Okay, WeBuildTheWall.org is where you need to go. And here's the thing. When this thing started and it was getting some funding, it was a dream, right? Here's our goal. Now, you've got a wall going. 3 weeks, you're going to have 2 miles of it. Let me ask you this: it cost $6 million. Was that all funded through people's donations to webuildawall.org?
Every penny of it. Every penny of it. And of course, to date, there was nearly 20 million collected. So people might be thinking, what are you going to do with the other 13, 14 million? We're going to go along the entire border, find these landowners, these ranchers who are under siege. I met the landowner, by the way, yesterday, and I'll tell you, it just ripped your heart out listening to the stories. He can't let his family go outside. He's accosted every day by these drug dealers, by these human smugglers. He was on site yesterday, and he said to me, he said, since you guys started this section of wall, he said there have been 0 crossings through his property. So people should be asking themselves, well, why can't the government do this? Why can't the government seal the border? Why can't they do it at a reasonable cost? Because it's the government. It's the federal government. Everything they put their hands on, you have cost overruns, you have delays. It takes forever to get anything done when you work through the federal government. So what we're also hoping is to shame Congress, to shame the federal government that a group of people, a handful of people with the help of the American people, a lot of the American people, can get done what the government cannot get done.
So, Sheriff, when you build this 2-mile wall and $6 million, you're building it on the land of property owners that have given you permission to do that.
That's correct.
Right.
That's what the original goal was, private property, because we'd never get approval to do this on the federal
you'll never get
area of the border down here. And I mean right on the border. I sent you a couple pictures. I'll send you more. People can take a look. Just to get an idea, this is near a mountain range, Mount Cristo Rey, a very rugged crossing. If to try to get around what we're building now, you'd have to be an expert mountain climber because this thing's going to run up to the base of Mount Cristo Rey on one end. On the other end, it's going to be monitored by the Border Patrol. We're also building the Border Patrol 300 feet up a lookout point where you could see all along this section. You could see into El Paso. You could see into Juarez, Mexico. Even the Border Patrol who works this area is amazed. They said, this is going to be outstanding. It's going to help us better patrol this area. And by the way, cameras, surveillance cameras are going to be built as part of this project. This is all within the $6 million. And sensors. This thing can sense anything that gets near it within 40 feet. So once you get within 40 feet of this, sensors go off. The Border Patrol will be able to see with their surveillance system what's going on, and they can tell the difference between whether it's a human that's approaching the fence. There's wildlife over here, whether it's a deer, a jackrabbit, or something like that. We're using state-of-the-art stuff. But that's why I said I'm like a kid on Christmas morning. This is unbelievable. I knew we could do it, but to actually come down here and see it underway, it's no longer just a vision. It's now reality.
It is amazing. How did the landowners get through just local zoning ordinance? I mean, if you own land in almost anywhere in America and you try to put up a flagpole, you have to go through zoning ordinance and the code verification. I mean, how did they get that done where they could actually put up this wall without government interference locally? Yeah,
and you remember as I talked about this thing, and I said there's developments going on, but I can't talk about it. We tried to keep it under wraps, but we did our due diligence, meaning we got all the permits. We worked with the city of El Paso down here. We worked with the federal government. DHS has been down here. Border Patrol has been down here. Their inspectors have been down here. Everything that we're doing is legal, but what happened is a little of this leaked out. Next thing you know, people within the city over here, they tried to stop it. They tried to go to court and get an injunction, but none of it worked because everything we're doing here is legal. This is a very mountainous area. So when we say on private land, a lot of people are they might think something like a neighborhood and zoning laws with a neighborhood, and you can only put a fence up so high and so on and so forth. But this is a very mountainous area, so it's very different. And so the laws still apply, but the laws are, especially here in Texas. New Mexico is a little different. Some of this wall that we're building is in El Paso, and the other part is in New Mexico. But we did work with government officials. They tried to go to court. They knew they were going to fail, so they stopped. We got all the approval. We got all the permits. I'll tell you what, it was real. It's real. The story behind this thing is going to be amazing. We've had everybody down here, from Politico to CNN, has come down here to cover this thing. I was interviewed by Politico yesterday. They're going to do a long series on it. But I'll tell you what, the thing again, like I said, John, if we could just get the government out of the way, the heck with them, because they're not going to do anything about this. But the American people can, with good leadership, with good vision. Brian Colfod started this thing, as you know, the triple amputee who was injured severely in a rocket attack as he was serving his country in the Air Force in Iraq. And he put together a team of people. He called me up. There's others involved. This is a team effort. And you know what? We put our minds to it. We put our hearts to it. We asked the American people for help. They stepped up as they always do in a time of crisis, and we got this thing done.
I tell you what, we need to coordinate, and the next time you go down there, I'd love to go down with you, do my radio show live from, just that spot, the other half of my trying to build. We can get a bunch of people on, focus the day on it. I think that would be really neat because this has gone from, a vision and a dream to now you have a wall. The Border Patrol has seen the benefit of it. They're utilizing the surveillance you have. You've self-funded it. It's real. It's in a place that's actually having an impact. And I think the more coverage we can do for this, the better. So I want to come down there. You can do my show with me together live. What do you think?
Let's do it. One other tidbit here. This wall, tubular steel, has a 75-year life expectancy. With the material we're using, the government's wall that they're building, their bollard fencing, has only a 25-year lifespan. So you can see the quality of this thing is unbelievable. It can be done at a lot less cost. But I think it'd be great for you to come down here, you and I to come down here to see it. I'll get you some more pictures. You can put them up wherever so people can actually see what I'm talking about and see what's going on here. This is doable to seal the southern border. The only one with a sense of urgency is the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Everyone else in Congress runs from this thing like their hair's on fire. This is not that difficult, John. It's just not that difficult to seal the southern border, to fix it, but there's no will on the part of Congress.
Well, you're going to have to do it yourself, and that's what you're doing, and I applaud the efforts. I'm out of time. America's Sheriff, Sheriff David Clarke. More information, go to americasheriff.com. Live at the border where they just built a mile and a half of a 2-mile wall. They're funding $6 million. Look, you've got to donate to this. There's a lot of things to donate to. This is real. They're building it. Even $50 or $100 is going to go a long way. WeBuildTheWall.org. Go there. WeBuildTheWall.org.